Welcome back to Motion 24, the only channel that goes deeper, digs harder, and uncovers the stories the main show doesn't want you to see. And today, buckle up, because what we're about to reveal is not just surprising, it's downright terrifying. We're diving into a story so dark, so twisted, and so explosive that it may rewrite everything you thought you knew about Matt Roloff and Caryn Chandler. For months, fans were told a simple version of events. The engagement ended. The wedding was off. Life moved on. But behind the scenes, insiders are whispering about something far more chilling, a secret theory so shocking that even longtime LPBW followers are struggling to wrap their heads around it. What if the wedding wasn't just delayed? What if it was engineered? What if the entire relationship was slowly, carefully shaped into a trap? A psychological snare designed to corner Matt Roloff at the very moment he was most vulnerable. And what if the breakup wasn't the beginning of the end, but the final explosion of a manipulation years in the making? Today, we're breaking down the clues, the insider comments, and the disturbing patterns that fans are now calling the ultimate Roloff con. Before we get into the most jaw-dropping theory in LPBW history, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to Motion 24, and ring the notification bell. Because after today, you're not going to want to miss a single new update or hidden detail we uncover. This is one episode you'll be thinking about long after it ends. For years, viewers have watched the unfolding romance between Matt Roloff and Caryn Chandler. Their relationship began while Caryn was still an employee at Roloff Farms, a fact that has always been a point of contention and quiet speculation among fans, and even within the Roloff family itself. After Matt's long and often tumultuous marriage to Amy Roloff came to an end, Caryn stepped into the role of the patriarch's partner. Their journey culminated in April 2023, when Matt announced their engagement after 6 years together. He told People magazine, "Our plan is to enjoy our engagement, and we are looking forward to a simple but elegant wedding in 2024. Essentially, it appeared to be the happy ending Matt had been seeking, a new beginning with the lady who had become his pillar of support. However, as the months passed, the initial enthusiasm for the engagement gave way to an odd feeling of inactivity. The 2024 wedding date passed without any formal announcements, invites, or venue reservations. Behind the happy pictures and affectionate Instagram posts, insiders began to whisper that tension was rising. It appeared like the wedding was being put off indefinitely. According to others close to the marriage, there was hesitancy and debate. According to reports, Matt was terrified of getting married again after going through a highly public and extremely difficult divorce. He even voiced his concern that marriage might alter his and Caryn's chemistry in an open moment on the show, raising doubts about the necessity of mending something wasn't broken. He and Caryn had established a life together, alternating between Arizona and Oregon, but Matt was becoming more and more reluctant to take the last step toward a formal marriage. However, it was said that Caryn was becoming increasingly nervous. Her decision to sell her Oregon home was a blatant indication that she was all in and prepared to become Mrs. Roloff and combine her life with Matt's. However, she was in a limbo, living in a house that was technically Matt's, which she acknowledged with a tinge of annoyance. After giving her house and refocusing her life, she was now confronted with the unsettling thought that the wedding she had staked her future on might never take place. Her once dominant influence in Matt's life seems to be diminishing. Caryn, a lady who is known for taking leadership, felt the ground tremble under her feet as the power dynamic changed. According to reports, a sinister and well-thought-out strategy started to take shape in this atmosphere of uncertainty and growing despair. At first, it was so subtle that it was easily written off as the typical aches and pains of aging. Caryn started complaining of an enigmatic and enduring weariness. She appeared to be constantly exhausted, with a deep, bone-weary fatigue that was unabated by sleep. Next, she complained of pain, a persistent, nebulous ache that seemed to spread throughout her body without any cause. Matt, who had always been a loyal partner, was worried. He recommended innumerable medical professionals, but Caryn was always ahead of the game. She asserted that she was already on it and that she was scheduled to meet with a leading expert in their industry. This famous physician was conveniently located in a different city a long way away. Insiders now note that this particular detail was the first important component of her plan. It made it impossible for Matt to conveniently attend appointments or take an active role in her medical treatment. The information she supplied him would be his only source of information. She would go alone for these meetings, returning with grim news of the series of tests she was going through. The story was expertly crafted and presented with a display of exhausted bravery that left Matt feeling only pity and worry. The deceit intensified. Caryn returned after a solo trip with the news that she had had a biopsy. Just the word lingered, laden with dreadful connotations. She said it would be excruciating to wait for the results. With worst-case possibilities circling his mind, Matt was a complete mess. He made an effort to be encouraging and upbeat, but Caryn's mood was one of subdued fear, quietly bracing him for the worst. Insiders claim that the day the results were announced was a masterclass in manipulating emotions. Caryn collapsed into Matt's arms upon returning home in a rush of sobs. She broke the news he had been afraid to hear. She claimed to have cancer, but it wasn't just any cancer. Rather, it was an aggressive, uncommon sort for which there were no simple cures. With anguish choking her voice, she stated that the prognosis was questionable. There were no certainties, and the procedure would be arduous. She was up against an opponent who was fighting for her life. According to all accounts, Matt was utterly broken. He had envisioned spending the rest of his life with Caryn, and the idea of losing her was intolerable. He promised to support her during the entire journey. Caryn, however, had another well-thought-out strategy. She demanded that she be in charge of all correspondence with her physicians. She would bitterly decline Matt's offers to talk to them in order to better comprehend the diagnosis and treatment plan, claiming that she wanted to absorb it on her own terms and that it was too difficult to engage others. By essentially cutting him off from any possible source of truth, she was establishing a closed information loop in which she was the only gatekeeper. Caryn took action while Matt was overcome by a strong mixture of grief, terror, and a frantic need to keep her safe. It was the point at which her whole scheme had been intensifying. She set her trap in a conversation that sources say was heartbreakingly compassionate but completely dishonest. She reportedly remarked, "My one dream, Matt," shaking as she held his hand, "is to die as your wife. I have no idea how long I have left. Let's not wait, please." Matt felt as though the words were a dagger to his heart. The emotional weight of her alleged last request instantaneously melted all of his prior reservations about marriage, as well as all of his worries and uncertainties. How could he turn down the woman he love's final request? The ideal sense of urgency was produced by the hazy timetable of an unclear prognosis. A large, lavish wedding was no longer the focus. There was a race against the clock. Gently but insistently, she pushed him to organize a quick, modest ceremony. The legal and emotional stability of being his wife before it was too late was more important than the celebration. She presented this as her one hope, the one thing that would give her comfort in her last days. There was nothing else Matt could do. He pushed himself into organizing the wedding, which was a hurried and solemn event, motivated more by a sense of impending catastrophe than by joy. Everything was going according to plan for Caryn. In order to ensure her legal and financial status as Matt's wife, she had orchestrated a crisis so severe that it overcame all of his fears, compelling his hand and urging him to the altar. Others in the Roloff orbit were starting to sense a twinge of concern, while Matt was engrossed in a maze of sadness and hectic wedding preparations. There were flaws in the story as told by a distressed Matt. All of it was too convenient, too theatrical, and too ambiguous. Amy Roloff was at the heart of this increasing suspicion. Despite her, Matt, and Caryn's complicated and frequently unpleasant past, Amy felt obligated. She couldn't overlook Matt's suffering because she had created a family with him. In the face of this heartbreaking news, she made the decision to show solidarity by making a large gesture of support. She intended to send a huge, exquisite bouquet of flowers to the famous oncology clinic where Caryn pretended to be a patient. It would represent peace and convey the idea that old grievances may be put aside during times of distress. Amy called the clinic a prestigious establishment with an immaculate reputation. She clarified the circumstances and requested that the arrangement be either brought to Caryn Chandler's room or held for her at her upcoming appointment. The chief nurse who answered the phone was thorough and patient. She looked through the inpatient records, but there was no one with that name. Once more, there was nothing in the outpatient registry. Sensing the caller's anxiety, the nurse double-checked everything, rewriting the name and searching for any potential variations or administrative errors. With a final, icy response, she came back to the line. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We have no patient by that name, and our records show we never have." Amy fell silent in shock. With her head spinning, she hung up. It must have been an error. Perhaps she mispronounced the clinic's name. She checked again with Matt, who confirmed the exact name she had shouted in his distress. Amy felt a chilling knot of dread start to develop in her stomach. This was a falsehood, not just a miscommunication. Zach was the first person she called. The acrimonious dispute over Roloff Farm's future had caused Zach and his father to have a tense relationship for years. Zach listened carefully as his mother described the talk with the clinic because he had long been suspicious of Caryn's power over his father. He was appalled, not surprised. He now had a tangible piece of proof to support his own concerns, which had been seething beneath the surface. He was aware that one phone call would not be enough to confront his father. Matt was too engrossed in Caryn's story, too emotionally invested. He would brush it off, saying they were attempting to ruin his joy. They required more. They required indisputable evidence. Zach got an idea at that moment. He was able to assist his father with business affairs by having access to certain of his financial accounts. He entered onto his father's credit card statements, which Matt frequently used for travel and large purchases, with a heavy heart. Finding the costs of Caryn's trip for her treatments, flights, lodging, anything that would support her claim that she saw a specialist in a different city was his aim. His eyes scanned the recent charges, looking for hotel chains and plane tickets. He located them. The city where the specialist was supposed to be located did in fact have costs. His heart dropped for a second, wondering if his mother had been mistaken. The timing of the transactions, however, caught his attention. They coincided precisely with the days that Caryn was expected to be going through exhausting chemotherapy treatments. However, neither a hospital nor a medical facility was listed among the merchant names. The fees applied to a high-end day spa, a deep tissue massage receipt, a luxury facial receipt, and an all-day pampering package receipt were among the other receipts. At a 5-star resort, the woman allegedly battling a rare and deadly disease had been getting massages and moisturizers during her treatment days. He was sickened by the image's grotesqueness and sociopathic nature. This was a heinous, heartless falsehood, not merely a lie. The smoking revolver was in his hand now. What would happen when they shot it was the question. Confronting Matt was a delicate and intimidating undertaking. Zach and Amy were aware that a straightforward accusatory approach would simply make him withdraw even further into Caryn's deceit. They needed to be tactful and portray the facts as a painful finding resulting from sincere concern rather than as an attack. They decided to sit down with him at a peaceful time when Caryn wasn't home. They began by recognizing the extreme stress he was experiencing and expressing their love and concern for him. Amy then described her call to the cancer clinic in a composed manner. She reiterated to him the chief nurse's statement, stressing that they had reviewed their records numerous times. As they had anticipated, Matt's first response was one of denial. He asserted that it must be an error, a violation of privacy policy, or that Caryn may have enrolled under a false identity to protect herself. He was frantically attempting to keep the heartbreaking story cohesive. Zach then carefully moved the printed credit card statements across the table while speaking in a steady yet melancholy tone. He simply pointed to the dates of the alleged chemotherapy, and then to the associated fees from the upscale day spa without saying anything further. He merely requested an explanation from his father. Matt's face was pale as he gazed at the documents. A massage, a facial, a day of pampering. He glanced back and forth between the dates and the itemized expenses. Each of the sentences that flashed before his eyes was evidence of an unimaginable betrayal. Together, the two pieces of proof were indisputable. The spot invoices from Caryn's chemotherapy days, along with the clinic's complete lack of any documentation of her, painted an indisputable picture of sociopathic-level deceit. No explanation or potential misinterpretation could account for it. With the power of a physical blow, the terrible truth started to sink in. He hadn't been duped by the woman he was going to marry, the one whose alleged final desire he was about to grant. She had turned his worst anxieties into a weapon. In a cold-blooded, well-planned scam, she had trapped him in a marriage by using the shadow of death itself, the most profound and dreadful of human experiences. All of it, the health crisis, his heartbreaking anguish, and his desperate haste to the altar, was a sick piece of theater created for her own self-serving benefit. He was the victim of a protracted scam, and he had fell for it wholeheartedly. He was not a devoted fiancé fulfilling a last wish. The time for reckoning had arrived. A tempest of unadulterated, unrefined emotion followed the discovery. The cornerstone of Matt's reality had been smashed into a million pieces, and his entire universe had been upended. His grief for Caryn's imminent death was immediately replaced by a deeper new sorrow. The sorrow for the trust that had been so brutally betrayed, the sorrow for the love he believed he had. Sources who saw the fallout claimed that Matt experienced waves of incredulity, anger, and intense, heartbreaking sadness. In an attempt to comprehend the magnitude of the betrayal, he isolated himself and refused to communicate with anyone. How could he face the lady who had done this to him? Even so, what could he say? When the altercation did occur, it was said to be explosive. Caryn strolled into a tight and oppressive quiet when she got home, blissfully ignorant that her plan had been discovered. Matt just placed the evidence, the credit card statements from Zach and the phone call log from Amy, on the table, his face a mask of anguish and rage. He didn't have to speak. According to insiders, Caryn's response was devoid of regret or embarrassment. She apparently became enraged instead, blaming Amy and Zach of attempting to ruin their happiness and of creating false evidence to cause them to become estranged. She made an effort to deceive Matt into thinking that his own family, not her, was manipulating him. However, the evidence was too strong and the fraud too obvious. Her irate accusations and desperate denials only made her guilt more apparent. Everything they had created together was destroyed in the ruthless, unsightly battle, which was reported to have lasted for hours. Ultimately, Caryn was compelled to depart, her back against the wall and her falsehoods completely exposed. The engagement was over. The wedding was off. The big scam had failed. The little people, big world community was rocked by the news of the abrupt breakup. But the public narrative was obviously a sanitized version of reality. Matt sent a well-crafted statement on Instagram on July 22nd, discussing their amicable separation. "Caryn and I have decided to part ways and end our engagement," he stated. "Life's a continued journey, and this is the right step for us at this time." The statement was professional, uninteresting, and revealed nothing of the sinister drama that had been going on behind the scenes. The public saw it as just another breakup between a reality TV pair. For those within the inner circle, however, the reality was a secret that was fiercely guarded, a revelation that was too painful and scandalous to ever be revealed. Matt had been the victim of a cruel and intricate hoax, and the family had to shield him from the shame of the truth leaking out. They put up a unified, albeit solemn, look as they closed ranks. A straightforward mutual breakup would be the official narrative. However, the true tale, the story of the fictitious illness, would be hidden, and only a select few would be aware of it. Matt Roloff underwent a transformation in the weeks and months that followed. The happy, upbeat patriarch had vanished, to be replaced by a more solemn, reflective person. He immersed himself into his job on the farm, letting his mental turmoil be released via physical effort. The ideal home he and Caryn had been constructing loomed as a shabby reminder of a now false future. His character was severely wounded, as was the trust that had been so essential to it. He grew more alone and suspicious of the motives of everybody around him. His psyche was permanently scared by the experience. He had been made to face the terrible truth that the person he had loved and trusted the most in the world was capable of deceit on an almost unfathomable scale. A warning about the perils of being vulnerable and the evil that may lurk behind a tender smile. It was a betrayal that would trouble him for years to come. The ultimate scam was over, but Matt Roloff would have to pay the emotional price for a very long time. And it raises a terrifying issue for all of us. How well do we ever truly know the people we love? And what other mysteries lie beneath reality TV's meticulously manicured exterior? The intricacies of Caryn's purported scheme expose an extremely unsettling degree of premeditation. The psychological chess game that insiders think she was playing may be dissected. Her selection of cancer as the weapon was well thought out and incredibly cruel. It's a sickness that makes everyone instantly sympathetic. In any emotional dispute, it is the ultimate trump card. By asserting that she possessed a rare and aggressive form, she achieved multiple goals simultaneously. Because of her rarity, nobody was able to inquire about the details of her symptoms or course of treatment. People wouldn't know much about it because it wasn't a common illness. The alleged cancer's aggressiveness produced the sense of urgency and ticking clock that was necessary for her scheme to force a hasty wedding. Another brilliant move was the ambiguous prognosis. It gave her the ability to change the timeline as she saw fit. The prognosis could suddenly worsen if Matt was taking too long. She could give him a glimmer of hope that would keep him interested and cooperative if things were going well. She could play the role of the tragic, courageous victim and change the story as she saw fit. Another essential component of the deceit was her insistence on managing all correspondence with her made-up doctors. A loving partner would be deeply involved in any actual medical emergency, going to appointments, talking to doctors, and looking into possible treatments. Caryn presented Matt's absence from this process as a self-preservation tactic, saying it was too painful for her to involve him in the gory details, even though it should have been a serious warning sign. She took advantage of his sympathy by persuading him that by stepping back, he was honoring her desires and assisting her in adjusting. The truth was, in fact, being walled off from him. Because of this seclusion, he became totally reliant on her for all information, making her the only one who could tell her own made-up tragedy. He didn't have somebody to ask the difficult questions or a way to confirm her statements. She was giving the performance of a lifetime to a captive audience of one. She furthered the deceit by portraying the marriage as her dying wish. The emotional blackmail was so strong that it was nearly difficult to resist. To turn oneself into a monster would be to refuse such a request. As a last act of love for a dying woman, it changed the wedding from a celebration of a future together to a spiritual obligation. It fundamentally changed the context, eliminating any chance for reasoned debate or postponement. This tremendous emotional pressure overshadowed Matt's personal aspirations and worries. He was now a caregiver carrying out a last duty, not a decision-making partner. Another deliberate feature was the selection of faraway, out-of-town expert. In addition to keeping Matt at arm's length, It lent credence to her story. If she were purportedly receiving treatment at a nearby hospital, he could have easily visited, or they might have crossed paths with acquaintances, making it much more difficult to uphold the lie. Because of the physical separation, her deceit was able to flourish in an environment free from the scrutiny of truth. And the most daring aspect of the whole plan was the high-end day spa. This demonstrates an alarming degree of hubris and a disturbing absence of morality. It takes the psychopathic mind to believe in deceit to the point where one would enjoy spa treatments on days when one should be receiving life-saving chemotherapy. She was enjoying herself as she lied, lavishing herself with the freedom and money she earned. This change in tone elevates the plot from a frantic manipulation plot to a cold, predatory fraud plot. It proves that she wasn't acting out of true fear or desperation, but rather out of a cold-blooded greed for power, completely oblivious to the mental anguish she was causing to the guy she loved. The falsehood wasn't the red flag. The casual brutality with which it was carried out was the real red flag. It was the mental picture of her in her fluffy robe, fighting for her life as Matt sat at home, his heart aching. That is the specific feature that transforms this into a psychologically devastating act, rather than just a plain falsehood. The next question to consider is, how does this impact the reality TV ecosystem as a whole? A certain Roloff family has been shown on Little People, Big World for a long time. As spectators, we are welcomed into their houses, lives, and struggles. However, our perception is limited to what is captured by the cameras and the stories that are crafted by the editors. That meticulously crafted reality is ripped to shreds by this story and this insider theory. That what goes on behind the scenes may be significantly more complicated and sinister than what we see on TV is implied. It makes us wonder how much of what we see is real and how much is staged. Since Caryn had been a cast member for so long, she would have had a deeper appreciation for the impact that story may have. She was a master of stage presence, captivating audiences with her charisma and acting chops. Could it be that she started to view her personal connection as nothing more than a plot point to be managed in order to get her desired result? As the boundaries between her real life and her on-screen persona got increasingly blurry, an atmosphere where individual drama is valued is established by the show itself. If the plot is interesting, you'll have a better chance of staying on the show. Is it possible that this influenced her thoughts? A last-ditch effort to ensure her unshakable position in the Roloff dynasty by fabricating the perfect plot device, a terrible illness, and a marriage on her deathbed? Despite how unsettling it is, we must consider this possibility. The very notion of reality television is betrayed by this alleged deceit, which goes beyond a personal betrayal. This is about giving us a genuine look into actual people's lives. A complicated and frequently concealed truth lies behind every edited scene, behind every tearful revelation. This is something that the film serves as a strong reminder of. Occasionally, that truth is an elaborate fabrication. All bets are off if this story is real. It throws a gloomy cloud over Little People, Big World's legacy, and makes us question everything we thought we knew about Caryn and Matt. All of a sudden, the idyllic farm life, the trials of family life, and the search for love take on a new hue, tarnished by the shadow of an almost unbearable deceit. Because the argument and separation are just the beginning, let's delve further into the complex web of this purported deceit. They mark the start of what will be an arduous and lengthy process of reconstruction. Everyone in the area is affected by the emotional debris of such a huge explosion. This meant that the Roloff family had to reevaluate their connections, reevaluate their interactions over the years, and finally accept the reality that a master manipulator had been living among them. Beyond the event itself, we must investigate the psychological aftermath for all parties concerned if we are to grasp the seriousness of the problem. And we must begin with the guy at the epicenter of the storm, Matt Roloff. The guy who climbed out of the ruins of this relationship was a different person than when he started. Despite the intensity of the first shock and fury, something far more sinister emerged, a deep and paralyzing shame. Matt Roloff has long taken great satisfaction in his abilities as a businessman, negotiator, and situational and people reader. Being a patriarch who is perpetually 10 steps ahead, a visionary, and a problem solver are the bedrocks of his identity. It hit him square in the gut to be so utterly and totally tricked, to have his compassion and understanding turned against him in such a stunning way. He was emasculated, not simply heartbroken. According to some on the inside, the humiliation was nearly too much to take. For years, he had upheld Caryn's innocence in front of his family, especially Amy. He had set her up to be his equal, confidant, and collaborator. He had long denied his family's concerns as animosity or envy, but now he had no choice but to face the truth. He had no choice but to confront his children, no longer in the role of a wise father, but instead as a helpless victim of his own bad decisions. A great deal of personal humiliation resulted from this switch of positions. His entire recollection of his time with Caryn was tarnished, examined through a sad new prism. Could you believe it? He had no choice but to play back their whole relationship in order to find any details he could have missed. Every kind gesture, every proclamation of affection, and every shared ambition was suddenly questionable. Was her love for him ever genuine? Or was he always just a tool to get the job done? Had her early attraction to him, while she was still an employee on the farm, been a plot to depose Amy at some point? Supposedly, these are the thoughts that go through his mind when he's sleeping. The destruction of the entire faith he had placed in her was devastating. Unlike his hard and protracted divorce from Amy, this one happened suddenly, an act of psychological warfare. This betrayed confidence in an abrupt and brutal manner. His sources claim that he is now very skeptical of other people's intentions as a result of this event. His once charismatic, innocent optimism is now characterized by a guarded, tired cynicism. At one point a representation of his future, the dream house is now a stark reminder of his foolishness and the life he came perilously close to losing. Moving past a breakup is not going to be a part of Matt's healing process. Restoring his confidence in himself and his judgment, as well as adjusting to the reality that he may be so easily tricked, will be important themes. Now we'll take a look at Amy Roloff, the story's unusual heroine. She plays a multifaceted and nuanced character in this drama. For a long time, she was portrayed as the resentful ex-wife who couldn't get over her ex-husband and was unhappy to see Caryn back in her old neighborhood. Her misgivings regarding Caryn were frequently explained away as jealousy and insignificant opposition to embracing Matt's newfound joy. A single call to the cancer center, however, puts everything in perspective. She did not behave maliciously, but rather out of an enduring bond with her children's biological father. She could not stand by while Matt was engulfed in what she perceived as deceit, despite their bitter divorce and several arguments. Making that call was a complicated but deeply loving gesture on her part. She risked her own safety to shield him, putting aside years of pain. Picture the emotional whirlwind that Amy went through. A moment of solemn, gloomy vindication would have occurred. In the end, she was correct. It was painfully true that her gut feelings concerning Caryn were right, even though everyone else had disregarded them. However, any feeling of victory would have been immediately overtaken by profound sadness for Matt's suffering. It must have been devastating for her to witness him in such a state of complete and utter betrayal. She had been compelled to reveal this tragedy, not a triumph. For all intents and purposes, this crisis may have marked the start of genuine healing in the relationship between Matt and Amy, their roles as grandparents and co-parents. Amy showed a level of devotion that went beyond their love past by rescuing him from this trap. She demonstrated that the bond of family they had established was more powerful than any other relationship they had in the past when it really counted. It recast her as the strong-willed matriarch who took swift action to protect her family, rather than the annoying ex-wife. With the event behind her, she was able to move on with her life with Chris, knowing she had made the proper choice as she closed a sad chapter with grace rather than resentment. This unpleasant intervention forced Zach and Tori Roloff into the role of conspirators, and it marked a turning point in Zach's relationship with his father. A rift had opened up between them as a result of their dispute over the farm. It was as if Zach had been betrayed, disregarded, and put down. Their relationship was damaged and bitter since he had spoken out against his father's handling of the negotiations. However, he had to set aside his wrath after learning about Caryn's deceit. Logging into those financial records and discovering the indisputable evidence was the behavior of a doting son, not an envious business rival. As a father figure, he helped his own father escape a perilous circumstance. Their dynamic could have been radically altered by this deed. It served as a stark reminder that their relationship as father and son was paramount, preceding any disagreement on financial matters. This was perhaps a turning point in Zach's life. A maturity and fortitude above his years were required of him to deal with the situation. It would have been inappropriate for him to burst in and shout, "I told you so." He had to work with his mom to plan the confrontation and break the terrible news to his father in a compassionate way so that he could hear it. It was a lot of weight to carry. Zach was probably already the rightful heir to the Roloff name before this happened, and it was more about his character and leadership than about any financial inheritance. The safety of the family was taken up by him and Amy. Unfalteringly supporting her spouse would have been Tori's responsibility. She could have been Zach's confidant, guiding him through the emotional maze of his situation. She would have grasped the gravity of the situation, having previously voiced her own subtle misgivings about Caryn. Uniting as one, they showed that the Roloff family was founded on trust and mutual aid. Despite the terrible tragedy, the couple may have grown closer as a unit and strengthened their marriage via the shared experience of rescuing their family from certain doom. Although the primary focus was on Matt, Amy, and Zach, the news would have unavoidably affected the other Roloff children, who would have interpreted it according to their own connections to the family and the program. Think about Jeremy and Audrey for a second. This revelation would have been shocking since they left Little People, Big World to build their own business around faith, meaningful living, and covenant marriage. Relationships with a spiritual foundation and a more conventional style have always been something they've defended. For them, Caryn's purported betrayal would serve as a terrifying warning about the perils of a partnership that isn't based on mutual respect and honesty. Their choice to separate themselves from the show's ugly reality would be validated, and the central message of their brand would be reinforced. Even though it would be mediated via their own ideological framework, they would feel profound empathy for their father's suffering. The scandal would show how different their father's secular reality TV world is from the one they have so carefully crafted for public view, and how dangerous it is, in their opinion. Another member of the Roloff family is Jacob, the most outspoken critic and prodigal son. Jacob has been vocal about his disapproval of reality TV, saying that it exposed him to an unrealistic and sometimes harmful environment as a child. He would have expected to hear about Caryn's intricate ruse, as it was the natural consequence of her life spent in front of the camera. To him, it would be the ultimate hideous example of the fakery he has long denounced. He saw Caryn as more than simply a con artist. She exemplified the system that promotes and rewards exaggerated and made-up narratives. On behalf of his father, he would probably feel profound, tragic rage, but also rational justification. He may say this is the result of letting individuals into your life whose main goal is to forward their own narrative, of erasing boundaries between reality and entertainment. He would have the most pessimistic outlook, seeing this whole thing as a damning indictment of his family's decades-long involvement in the reality TV industry as a whole, rather than of any one individual. He would see Caryn's purported behavior as an indicator of a more systemic issue. We need to look at the money involved to understand the premeditated aspect of this purported scam. Securing a substantial financial future was at stake, not merely the title of Mrs. Roloff. Matt Roloff has garnered a sizable fortune thanks to his many years of television, books, public speaking engagements, and, most significantly, his investments in prime real estate. Despite the sale of the section, Roloff Farms is still worth several $1,000,000. With him as her boyfriend, Caryn's financial situation was unstable. Her well-being hinged on his generosity. However, she would have been eligible for a substantial share of his wealth as his spouse. Regardless of what is stated in a will, a spouse in Oregon is entitled to a significant portion of their partner's assets upon their death. In principle, Caryn might have accelerated the process of inheriting her wealth by convincing Matt that she was terminally ill and then tricking him into a wedding. Any suggestion of a prenuptial agreement would have seemed crude and unsuitable in light of the story of the dying woman's final wish. In what way could Matt possibly get a woman to sign a prenuptial agreement while she was supposedly near death? People would have thought it was a cruel, icy move. Illness served as an ideal cover for the affluent person to avoid the usual financial checks and balances associated with a second marriage. There was an alleged financial component to the strategy that was really cunning. The goal was to get her the money that Amy had worked so hard to achieve during her 27 years of marriage and childrearing as quickly as possible. Caryn would have been obligated to contribute financially to Matt if the wedding had been approved. Had she persisted in believing that she was sick and eventually resolved to undergo a miraculous recovery, she would have been married to him by now. Matt has his own health problems, though if things had taken a sadder turn, she would have been the bereaved widow and heir to a large fortune. This financial incentive brings an air of icy, predatory greed to the whole thing. It shifts the focus from the insecure woman's desperate attempt at deceit to the planned theft of a family's heritage. The Trojan horse was her pretended cancer, and the goal was to protect the kingdom. Now that we have this terrifying idea to guide our analysis, we can look back on Caryn's tenure on the show with a fresh and disturbing eye. Were there warning signs that the family and viewers failed to notice? Recall when she and Matt were first dating. Amy often showed signs of discomfort, going on record to say that she was uneasy about Matt's involvement with a farmhand while they were still married. The public saw this as Amy's hold-on mentality back then. Now that we see things differently, was Amy's gut feeling about a planned social climb. Little People, Big World star Matt Roloff's selfish new farm decision disappoints fans. Amy Roloff shares Michigan fun, Mrs. Chris Marek, and Little People, Big World fans irritated react to Matt Roloff's story. LPBW insiders reveal shocking reason behind Matt and Caryn's split. I will explain everything. Little People, Big World star Matt Roloff's selfish new farm decision disappoints fans. Upon witnessing Little People, Big World actor Matt Roloff's choice to purchase a farm, some viewers expressed feelings of despair and selfishness. On April 29, the TLC star made an announcement to his Instagram followers about relisting a chunk of Roloff Farms for sale. The property's size, potential, and endearing character make it more than simply a property. It's a legacy in the making, as Matt captioned the update. The property of Roloff Farms is being sold for $2,895,000. The big house and 16 acres that made up Matt's Helvetia, Oregon, property, which was up for sale in 2023, are currently being used as a holiday rental. Jeremy and Zach Roloff, his sons, and he were unable to settle on a price for the 6,000-square-foot house and the adjacent land, so he made the decision. Commenters' views on the reality program were diverse. Supporters even went so far as to write "so fun," and others quickly followed suit. "I hope the sale goes well for you." While another individual exclaimed, "Wonderful house." I wish you all the best as you begin this next phase of your life. However, there were a few who were let down. Someone said it was so sad that they couldn't figure out what was wrong with the kids and then saw it for sale. Someone else stated he was sad and self-centered for selling it rather than passing it on to his heirs. My God, that's awful. Someone who had grown up watching the show remarked, "It is extremely disappointing to see who greedy Matt is being on Instagram," referring to this person. The preservation of this beautiful country for the sake of future generations is more important to me than any potential financial gain. Everyone in Matt's family had a hand in making Little People Big World. It would have been more appropriate for Amy to receive everything instead of keeping it in the family. Some have said that it's kinda sad created your own Disneyland and your grandkids won't get to experience it. In agreement, someone else said, "Sad, your kids gave up their childhood to work on the show and you can't even share it with them." Absolutely egotistical. Fans were already on the edge of their seats when Roloff recently hinted that an era was coming to an end. Amy Roloff shares Michigan fun. Mrs. Chris Marek, visiting her dad, Gordon Knight, to celebrate his 95th birthday was something that Little People Big World star Amy Roloff told her TLC viewers about this week. Extra information suggests that she enjoyed spending time with her siblings and had a fantastic experience seeing Michigan. She will be reunited with her loving husband, Chris Marek, in no time. The passing of Patricia Knight, Gordon's wife, was announced to TLC viewers in September 2019. She was 86 years old. Amy lived a full and loving life, and her daughter was grateful for it as her family mourned in Michigan. After remaining until October 2019 to assist her dad in adjusting to his new normal, she resumed her busy schedule. The fact that Amy Roloff paid a surprise visit to her mom's grave would have taken LPBW followers by surprise. Despite the distressing nature of the situation, she and her siblings thoroughly enjoyed themselves. On February 6th, she shared a carousel of photos from her beautiful home state. The majority of her photos featured her family against stunning backdrops. After last week's freezing weather in Oregon, she probably appreciated that it didn't seem too cold. Despite sharing some sweet family photos on Instagram, the LPBW star clearly missed her spouse, Chris Marek. In her post, she mentioned that she is looking forward to seeing Chris again in a few days. Fantastic Lakes region. Spending quality time with my dad and family. After visiting my mom's burial, we went for a hike around North Lake. Clear, crisp haze. Embrace it. Then they constructed a fire on the porch. Immediate departure to my home state. There is little time left. I can't wait to hear back from Chris. Members of Amy Roloff's mom's side of the family go absolutely crazy whenever she shares photos of them on Little People Big World. Regardless, you won't see them on the TLC show very often. They were so moved that they felt compelled to leave remarks of appreciation and respect. Look at your dad and brother, twins. Pleasant journey. Your dad is absolutely stunning for 95 years old. Be authentic and savor the present moment. You are excelling precisely as you are. Because of an unexpected heat wave in the 40s, your brother is wearing shorts. That is how we Midwesterners adore it. Having a great time with your loved ones is my wish for you. Do you share Amy Roloff's joy when she's with her dad and other family members? How do you feel about the comments she gives her followers? Use the area provided to express yourself. Little People Big World fans irritated? React to Matt Roloff's story. The news of their breakup was just broken to Caryn Chandler by Little People Big World patriarch Matt Roloff. A follow-up report irritated a small number of TLC viewers, but the majority were unsurprised. Read on to find out why that is. As Matt made the separation announcement on Instagram before the weekend, it didn't take much digging to find out. Caryn and I have decided to part ways and end our engagement, he said online, publishing his choice. Following this, he mentioned being amicable and how the breakup has made him value memories more. Along with locking the comments, he made it such that TLC viewers couldn't post. Somewhere else, though, they are still bringing it up. Everyone suspected something was wrong between the two, so the initial article didn't come as a shock. However, a following tale just made things worse for them. According to a number of sources, including the Sun US, Matt Roloff spent over $1 million on Caryn before they broke up. A number of individuals also felt it was an attempt at sensationalizing the story for clickbait purposes. Many Redditors were irked since the stories revolved around Matt's newly built house on the property. For a number of years, he kept everyone abreast on his progress. Caryn chose to sell her home, despite the fact that she had owned it before. She resided in it on the couple's infrequent visits to Oregon, but he didn't build it just for her. As One Little People, Big World fan put it, the story was written by the outlets for clicks. Also, another person has already called it fake news. The fact that Matt built a house and shared it with his ex-fiancée is in no way an excuse for him to be financially liable for their split. A other advocate made the comment, "That would be a pretty foolish way to spend your money if he didn't." His statement gave the impression that he didn't give his ex the whole amount. Furthermore, the TLC patriarch is extremely selective with his financial investments. Caryn Chandler appears to have little chance of retaining the Hillsborough mansion. And lastly, the farm has the legal right to own the land. If Caryn is due any money, the lawyers will most likely look into it carefully. At a later point, more details might become apparent. The divorce hearing will most likely not go on for an extended period of time due to the absence of a marriage license. LPBW insiders reveal shocking reason behind Matt and Caryn's split. Following Little People, Big World, fans are still in shock over the news that Matt Roloff and Caryn Chandler have decided to break their long-term relationship. But new information has surfaced about the true cause of the separation, so maybe there's more to this case than meets the eye. Matt Roloff and Caryn Chandler's long-term romance has been witnessed by fans of Little People, Big World. Their friendship began on Roloff Farms and blossomed into much more as time went on. Even Caryn's engagement ring and other accessories were on display before the TLC show was canceled after season 25. The Little People, Big World pair had planned a 2024 Hawaii wedding. Because Matt needed to focus on taking care of his aging mother, this was finally shelved. But new rumors have it that Matt and Caryn are officially splitting up, thus their Hawaiian wedding is off the books. In a social media post that he shared with his massive following, Matt Roloff announced that he and Caryn had decided to part ways and end their engagement. Matt went on to say that this decision is the right step for us at this time. He also mentioned that the divorce is amicable, and thanks all of his Little People Big World fans for their constant support while he went through this tough period. This collaboration was met with disapproval from many Little People, Big World viewers. Even though Matt and Caryn had been dating for quite some time, nobody saw it coming to this conclusion. Matt Roloff recently painted an image online suggesting that the split with Caryn Chandler is mutual, according to a Little People, Big World insider. However, they are portraying a completely different picture. Someone with knowledge of the situation recently spoke about it with the US Sun, stating, "Caryn started the split, but they are publicly claiming it was mutual after having problems for a while." No more today. What are you thinking about this gossip today? Let us know in the comments, and stay tuned by subscribing to our channel to get more updates like this. Thank you.